Good evening, my holy sisters and brothers. Normally, I would just come back with a huge smile and say, it's great to be with you again. And it is. It's great to be learning with you again. I missed you during the holiday. But how can any of us stop thinking about what's going on in Israel? We're actually forcing ourselves not to check the news and the social media and the media feeds all day long. I highly advise everybody to just restrict that diet. It makes you insane. It gives a kind of false sense of control that we're remaining as informed as we can be. And really, we're just processing those horrors over and over again. I think what we do need to focus on is what we can do. And this class is one of the most important things that we can do. Our rabbi, Yekusiel Kalmanson, teaches, all Israel is one, right? One family, one tribe, but really one body, right? And all of us feel, if the finger is hurt, does the hip not suffer? We're all one body. Many of us have personal connections. Our son is learning in Jerusalem this year. When we first heard the reports Saturday, during Shmini Atzeret, and all our phones were off, obviously, but the news filtered in. Somebody heard it from somebody else, a security guard, a housekeeper. The reports started coming in. Because I'm in Magenam, I'm an armed guard, a volunteer armed guard in our synagogue. We got extra information pretty quickly. After that, we had to get our phones and keep them in emergency mode in case we had to mobilize quickly. And obviously, thank God we haven't had, at least so far, emergencies here. But the horror of what was going on in Israel, and at that time we didn't know, whether our son was in harm's way in Jerusalem. I have an uncle that I'm very close with. He's actually a month younger than I am. He has 3 kids. One of them is in the Israeli army. 2 are in the reserves, right now waiting to be called up, and may well be called up. So many have been called up. So many people we know are connected to people who have, there are just no words. Almost 1,000 people have died. Thousands are injured. And over 100 captured in the most... Again, there's no words for what is going on. Israel has never seen something like this. It's a war. It's a very different kind of war. Israel, the nation of Israel, has been attacked many times in these thousands of years, and many Jews have been killed. We've suffered mightily, but the nation lives on. Am Yisrael Chai, the nation will live on. We will survive this. We will avenge these deaths. We will defeat this enemy. But if it's your family that's having these horrific deaths, captures, so I'm dedicating our learning today for the healing of those who are wounded, some gravely, for the redemption of the captives. Please, God, heal the wounded and redeem the captives. Bring them back to us. And may good triumph over evil. This is a battle of good versus evil. Make no mistake. This is a battle of good versus evil, and may good triumph over evil. We say amen. And may our learning today, and the learning of everyone who's learning, all the Jews that are learning around the world, and all of us who are praying constantly, groups. Last night, I actually participated in and kept watch over. As armed guards, we came out to protect gatherings, a large group of people praying psalms together. You'll hear often in the popular culture, what do thoughts and prayers do? The time for thoughts and prayers is past. Yeah, well, let me say that if you can't, pick up a rifle and be in the front line or be in the support system, bringing what the people in the front line need, and not all of us in the United States can do that, though we should keep asking ourselves, is there some way that we can physically and directly support them? But at the same time, praying for our brothers and sisters in Israel is a very strong countermeasure, and learning Torah is a strong countermeasure. The nation as a whole needs to be doing everything, some on the front lines, just as in ancient times, some fought on the front lines, some were priests bringing the sacrifices, some were sages learning Torah, and all were contributing to that war effort, So must we now. Please God, heal the wounded, redeem the captives, and let good triumph over evil. We say amen. Let's light up the darkness. Welcome, Yehudit in South Carolina. Am Yisrael High. Bill in mid-Missouri, Melissa in Great Neck, Lucy in Minnesota, David in Indiana, Shandora in the Bronx, Elvis is happy to be joining live, Bob in Iowa, Bella in Florida, Mark praying for Israel, Linda praying, Bill praying, and amen to the advice against doom scrolling, Sharon listening to the singing tribute for solidarity with Israel by all denominations of Judaism right now. Amazingly moving, beautiful. Put a link to that. Others may be interested. Guy, Faith and Trust. Belle in Texas. Joseph in Massachusetts. Laura praying. Renee, I'm Israel High. Lots of people saying amen, amen, and praying. God bless you all for joining this effort. Marjorie also praying. Patrice in Utah. Ella with us. Rochelle in Modesto. Welcome, everybody. Let's do our jobs. Let's learn. Okay, so our daf today is page 54. We're working our way through chapter 2 here in Tractate Kiddushin, the 20th volume of the Talmud. We're learning Mishnah number 9 of chapter 2, which basically held that a priest who, you have to give something of value to create betrothal. I saw a comment came up a few days ago. Somebody said, how can you pay for a wife? Isn't what creates marriage true love? And there's no money that should be involved in the course of true love. Yeah, but people get wedding licenses, wedding certificates, birth certificates, right? We're not talking about love here. We're talking about creating betrothal. And particularly in the ancient world, first of all, there was the dowry issue. And very often families were joined, by economic merger, as it were, between families, tribes, etc. But even aside from that, giving something of value, and it was often of just symbolic value, but it just had to be something that was, measurable, substantial. As we've learned, the minimum value is a peruta. I mean, it's tiny, but it had to be something that was givable, and that giving needed to be witnessed, right? I mean, we're so at sea in documents and documentation in our lives. It's hard for us to imagine that in ancient times, many people rarely saw a document in all of their lives. And there was no registrar and county recorder and, the wedding license office. There was nothing like that. So when there was a union, Jewish law came, the Torah came and said that this needed to be formalized, right? It needed to be witnessed so that the town knew that a new couple had formed. And that was very important. But when you gave, right? So when the prospective groom, as it were, the man betrothing the woman, when he gives something, it has to be his to give. And so here in Mishnah number 9, we're talking about a priest who has been given a portion of certain offerings. When the temple was standing, a priest who was working there would receive, for example, a portion of a sin offering that was for him to eat. So was it his? So if it's his, why can't he use that as something of value to betroth the woman? Answer, because it's consecrated, and the fact that he receives it in order to eat it is part of the process of bringing offerings. It's not his to do whatever he wants with it, right? That's the basic principle that we're working with. So we picked this up. We were discussing before the holiday on page 53 this debate between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, which in sort of bringing proofs, we're looking at various areas of the law, including when somebody makes a deposit with a money changer, the fact that you expect that the money changer, who has money coming in and out all the time, unless you tell him, hold this $10 for me. If you tell him hold $10 for me, okay, so when you come back and pick up your money, he'll give you $10, but it won't be the same $10 that you deposited with him. Now that matters if you thought it would be the same $10 because the $10 that you left with him was consecrated money. Perhaps it was misused, second tithe, that you brought to spend when you were here in Jerusalem. Or it was a gift that you vowed to give to the temple treasury. Okay, so that now is consecrated money. It's not available for your use. You just you deposited with him so that it wouldn't be stolen from you, so that you could, use it as it was intended to be used. If he exchanged it for other money, then who's responsible for the misappropriation of consecrated property? So the question is, when you deposited with him, did you have a reasonable expectation that what you left with him would be given back to you in the absence of a specific instruction that would happen? With a money changer, no, you don't have a reasonable expectation of that because he's got money coming and going. On the other hand, if you deposit money with a homeowner, then you have a reasonable expectation that he's not going to swap it out one money for another. You left this money with him, hold on to this for me, you're going to come back and get it. And then if he swaps it out for other money and it turns out it was consecrated money, then he would be the one who has to now, pay a penalty, or rather bring an offering, a guilt offering, for misappropriating consecrated property. You could say, well, you should have told him what it was, and we should try to do that, and the more communication, the better things will go. And then they discuss, well, what about a storekeeper? When you deposit money with a storekeeper, is he like a money changer or more like a homeowner? That's where we left off. We pick it up at the very bottom of 53b. The Gemara records a discussion on the reasons for the rulings of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. So Rav says, and now we're on 54a, we reviewed all angles of the opinion of Rabbi Meir, i.e. we have examined all of Rabbi Meir's statements with regard to consecrated property, and we did not find that he holds that consecrated property is not desacrilized if it is misused unwittingly, but it is desacrilized if it is used intentionally. Now, this was part of our Mishna that we're discussing. Okay, so the priest is not allowed to use something that was given to him for sacred purposes. That's in the case of a priest. Now, what about somebody who's holding his own money that he designated to give to the temple treasury? And he forgot that the money, let's say in that particular pouch, was for that reason, and he used it to betroth a woman. Did he betroth her or not? That's why we're asking this question. And now we're making a distinction, right? Rabbi Meir says, if it was consecrated property, like, you can't use it. You can't use it. Certainly a priest can't use it. Rabbi Meir generally says you can't use it, but there's some situations where you can. Meaning, if you misused it in this way, you're still going to have to pay a penalty for it, but was betrothal created? Right? And so they're making a distinction whether you did it on purpose or you did it unwittingly. And then what difference exactly does it make? Now, when we say that consecrated property was desacrilized, what this means is it's consecrated, right? And so, whether you did it intentionally or unintentionally, if you then used it either to purchase something or to betroth, right? Or you ate it, for example, let's say it was food that was consecrated and you ate it. Okay, so if you ate it, then it's gone, as it were. But if you tried to spend it, you can say it is not desacrilized because you can get it back. And whatever you purchase with it, we void that sale, go get the money back, so that money didn't lose its sanctity. On the other hand, if food was consecrated and you ate it, right, for yourself, so now you've consumed it, it's gone, so you could say that was desacrilized. It certainly didn't get used for holy purposes. When you ate it, you're going to have to replace it, you're going to have to pay a penalty, you're going to have to bring an offering, but it was desacralized in that way. So what about if that money that was really meant for the temple treasury, you used it for betrothal? So do we say that when you used it for betrothal, it was desacralized, and therefore betrothal was created, you're going to be responsible for replacing the money, etc.? Or do we say that money was not desacralized, it remains consecrated, therefore there was no betrothal? You might have thought there was betrothal, but there wasn't. You're going to get that money back from the woman, use it for its holy purpose. You can betroth her with something else, but no betrothal's been created yet, and etc. Right? So that's the issue at hand. Right? So we did not find that Rabbi Meir holds that consecrated property is not desacralized if it is misused unwittingly, but presumably we did find, says Rav, right, that money that is used intentionally, consecrated money that was used intentionally, okay, he knew it was consecrated, but he went ahead and used it anyway, then whatever he used it for desacralized the money, and therefore that sale or that betrothal is a valid sale or a valid betrothal, and he's going to have to go pay a penalty and replace what he misused. And as for our Mishnah, which indicates that this is Rabbi Meir's opinion, it should not be understood as Rabbi Meir's opinion with regard to consecrated property in general, but with regard to a case where a priest betrothed a woman using what? Not his portion of offerings, like his portion of a sin offering that he was supposed to eat, but rather priestly tunics that have not worn out and that can still be worn during the temple service. Okay, so the clothing that a priest wears when he's officiating in the temple, right? This is a priestly tunic. What is it used for? A priest serving in the temple. So it is consecrated. It is only for the priest to use while he's doing the holy avoda, the holy work that a priest does in the temple. What they're saying is that cloak, is it exclusively used for holy things? Well, yeah, right, isn't it? He only wears it in the temple and for the purpose of serving in the temple. Yeah, but doesn't he walk from one place to another in the temple? Might he have to put it on before he enters the temple? And so there are some non-sacred uses, as it were, of just clothing him from being naked, as opposed to being what he's wearing while he's bringing offerings, that are not necessarily sacred. And so since he owns these clothes, perhaps while, and they haven't worn out yet, since they have some non-sacred purpose, maybe one of those non-sacred purposes can include betrothing a woman with this garment. On the other hand, once it's worn out, okay, so this is a little bit similar to when a prayer book wears out. You don't just throw it in the trash. When a prayer book wears out, you have to place it in a geniza where it's going to be temporarily stored until it's buried. So, likewise, once the priestly tunics were worn out, there were some specific things that they were supposed to do with it, and it wasn't burying it, by the way. It was like, I can't remember right now what it was. I don't think there was a note about it. Okay, priestly tunics that have worn out. Yeah. Okay, interesting. The worn out clothes of common priests, as opposed to the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, were used as wicks in the lamps that provided light during the celebration of drawing water in the festival of Sukkot, which we just passed through. right? So you understand, they had a holy purpose. They were set aside to become wicks, to be used for these lights that were burned in the temple during the Simchas Bashueva, right? The festival of drawing water in the holy temple. Therefore, once they're worn out, the only purpose that they have is a holy purpose. And then if you use it for anything of your own, it's for sure misappropriation of something consecrated. Whereas before they've worn out, there's room for doubt. That's what they're going to say. So Rabbi Meir's opinion with regard to consecrated property in general was something, but with regard to a case where a priest betrothed a woman using priestly tunics that have not worn out, and that can still be worn during the temple service. If a priest betrothed a woman with such garments, Rabbi Meir holds that if he did so unwittingly, she is not betrothed, since clothes of this kind are not desacrilized and do not become hers. This is because they were initially given on the condition that the priests may benefit from them even when not performing the temple service. Why? Because the Torah was not given to the ministering angels. It is impossible for a priest to wear the garments only at the moment he is performing the service and at no other time. He's got to get to and from the locker room, let's say. Therefore, these garments are desacralized only if he intended to desacralize them. Now, the Gemara raises a difficulty with Rav's statement. Come and hear, with regard to priestly tunics that have worn out, one misuses property consecrated to the temple by using them. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. And what? Is it not so that this law would apply even if they had not worn out? And the Tana of that Mishna wanted to teach the additional law that it is still a transgression even after they are no longer fit for use. But the Gemara rejects this. No, this law applies specifically to garments that have worn out. Since these cannot be used by priests, right? There's no walking to and from the changing room to the place of the priestly service. So there is no personal use to be made of them. Once they're worn out, they're only fit to become wicks to be used in the lighting ceremonies in the temple. Since these cannot be used by priests, the permission to use them for non-sacred purposes has lapsed, and they are like other consecrated property that is subject to the law of misuse. Right? If something has multiple purposes, some of which are for holiness and some of which are not, then you can't say that they can't be used for anything private, because they can. But if something only has a use that is a holy purpose, then it is subject to all the laws of misappropriation of the consecrated. So the Gemara raises a difficulty with the explanation of Rabbi Meir's statement. Come in here, one is liable for misuse of property consecrated to the temple by using new shekels, meaning those that are given this year, which are used to purchase animals for this year's daily offerings, right, the communal offerings. But one is not liable for misuse of property consecrated to the temple by using old shekels, those given by those who failed to give the previous year's half shekel. Why? Because these old shekels are used not to purchase the offerings, but rather for temple maintenance. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir says one is liable for misuse of property consecrated to the temple, even by using old shekels. As Rabbi Meir would say, one is liable for misuse of property consecrated to the temple, not only by using money designated to purchase offerings, but even with the remainder of the chamber, meaning the money that remained in the chamber of the treasury after money was taken to purchase the animals used as communal offerings. I think what Rabbi Meir is simply saying is, look, anything that's being done around the temple, even just maintenance of the temple, paying the garbage men to take away the trash from the temple, that's a holy purpose because it's the holy business of the temple, right? Whereas Rabbi Yehuda seems to be saying, no, only the money that's actually used to purchase sacred offerings, that's consecrated, and these other kind of ancillary expenses of the temple, they're very important. But if somebody, uses that money, especially unwittingly, they're not going to be guilty of misuse of consecrated property. So the Gemara continues to ask the question, but why should one be liable for using the old shekels? Let us say the same logic. One is not liable because they were initially given on the condition that people may benefit from them. Why? Since the Torah was not given to the ministering angels. There was going to have to be a little bit of people benefiting from those shekels, and people could not help but benefit from them. This is as the money to repair the wall of the city and its towers comes from the remainder of the chamber. If we know as a population that money that's donated to the temple when the temple is standing, the first, and primary use of it is offerings, but that there's always going to be more than we need for the offerings. And so then the second use of it, what's left over, is going to be used for repairing the temple. And then if there's leftover after that, it's going to be used for repairing the walls of Jerusalem. Anybody can walk through the city of Jerusalem. So don't we benefit from having properly maintained standing walls in Jerusalem? If that is so, you can't say that money, shekels that were given to the temple treasury wouldn't at some point benefit private individuals rather than being used exclusively for sacred purposes. And if that's true, then why should the laws of misuse of the sacred apply to those shekels? So the Gemara answers, do not say that the opinion that one is liable for misuse of property consecrated to the temple by using money from the remainder of the chamber is that of Rabbi Meir. Rather, amend the Mishnah and say that it is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, right? Rabbi Yehuda is more lenient than Rabbi Meir in declaring what is meila, what is misuse of consecrated property and what is not. Now, come in here another proof, as it is taught in the Baraisa. Rabbi Yishmael bar Rabbi Yitzchak said, with regard to stones of the walls and towers of Jerusalem that fell, right? They're made of stone, so stones sometimes fall. So, if a stone from the wall of Jerusalem, literally Jerusalem stone, fell in the street, let's say it was a small one, and you're a pilgrim, went up to Jerusalem for Sukkot. And you're like, wow, look at this rock. I guess it came off the wall there. I could take it home with me and have a piece of Jerusalem. What a reminder, what a souvenir, what a beautiful memento of my pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Can you do that? Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yishmael bar Rabbi Yitzchak said, with regard to stones of the walls and towers of Jerusalem that fell, one is liable for misuse of property consecrated to the temple by using them. If you make personal use of these stones that fell, it's meila. You committed a transgression. And whose view is this? This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. So this indicates that according to Rabbi Meir, the use of even such stones renders one liable, despite the fact that it is not possible to avoid benefiting from them. Like, obviously, we're all benefiting from the walls, from the stones that are in the walls of Jerusalem when the walls are standing and we're walking around the city. So why would you say that if one of those stones fell, we can't take it home with us? People can make personal use. They have personal benefit that is not a sacred benefit, right? I mean, it's kind of like, are we pushing the question a little too far? I mean, one thing is to say the whole public benefits, and another thing is to say that an individual can take a stone home. But we're not really talking about the individual versus the collective. We're talking about, is something made for the sacred use or not? If standing in the walls of Jerusalem gives non-sacred benefit in that we're just walking around that city, and we could be, walking around that city doing business deals, and benefiting from the fact that the walls are there, then when somebody picks up a stone, I mean, you might say it's stealing from the public trust, as it were, but that would be a different transgression than misuse of the sacred, which has its own penalty and its own offering that you have to bring for it. Right, so this is the case that according to Rabbi Meir, the use of even these kinds of stones that fell off the walls render one liable for misuse of the sacred, despite the fact that it is not possible for people to avoid benefiting from them. And the Gemara again answers, do not say that this Baraisa is recording the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rather, amend the Baraisa and say that it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara challenges this explanation. If it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, Is Jerusalem consecrated at all? But didn't we learn in a Mishna, in Tractate Nedarim, page 10b, if one says that an item shall be considered like the lamb of the daily offering, right? So a lamb was brought every day among the daily offerings, like the animals designated as offerings and kept in special enclosures, like the wood of the altar, like the fires of the altar, like the sanctuary, like the altar, or like Jerusalem, right? If you said, if one says that an item shall be considered like the lamb of the daily offering, you understand? Or like the wood that is burned on the altar, or like the fires of the altar, like the sanctuary, like the altar itself, or like Jerusalem, what he's saying is this item, I am consecrating it, right? I am promising to give it as some kind of an offering, a donation to the temple or to pilgrims. It'll be used for something sacred. I'm taking it out of the realm of my possessions that I can use for my personal use. I am consecrating it, right? If one says this is like the altar, this is like the wood of the altar, he has consecrated it. And in the list of things that will be included, if you say it's like those things, like this thing, and that therefore you render it consecrated, in that list is Jerusalem itself, which would seem to indicate that the whole city is a holy city. Makes sense. It is a vow, right? If he says these things, it is a vow, and he is prohibited to derive benefit from that item, as he has compared it to something consecrated. The essence of a vow creating a prohibition is the statement that a certain item shall be like a consecrated item. So Rabbi Yehuda says, anyone who says that an item shall be considered Jerusalem has not said anything, indicating that Rabbi Yehuda holds that Jerusalem is not consecrated. Does he hold that? Or does he simply say it's a weird use of language to say that this item is like the city? It's not the same as saying this item is like an offering. This item is like the altar where offerings are brought, which is so much more obvious that he's trying to say it's going to be like the sacred. But if he says this is like Jerusalem, has he consecrated it, or has he rendered it prohibited like a consecrated item? And if you wish, or if you would say that Rabbi Yehuda's reason is that he holds that Jerusalem is not consecrated, and if you would say that Rabbi Yehuda's reason for saying that when comparing an item to Jerusalem does not make it prohibited like something that is consecrated, and you would say that Rabbi Yehuda's reason for this is not that he holds that Jerusalem is not consecrated, but rather because the one stating the vow did not say like Jerusalem, but rather stated only that the item shall be considered Jerusalem. Right? He didn't say like Jerusalem, he said it is Jerusalem. What does that mean? I said this pen is Jerusalem. Makes no sense. So certainly, why would I render the pen prohibited like a consecrated item? It seems like I haven't said anything meaningful. Right? Because the list said, if you say it's like the altar, right? Like the lamb, like enclosures, like the wood, like the fires, like the sanctuary, like the altar. But the list did say, or like Jerusalem. So why are you now saying that the word like is not included? But maybe it is. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda is talking about it's not consecrated, or it's not compared to something consecrated, because he didn't say like Jerusalem, but rather he only said it shall be considered Jerusalem, which is not a clear expression of a vow. But if you say this, isn't it taught in a Baraisa, Tractate Nedarim, Tractate on Vows, that Rabbi Yehuda says, anyone who says that an item shall be considered like Jerusalem, he has not said anything until he vows by comparing the item to an item that is sacrificed in Jerusalem. Okay, makes more sense. So this indicates that he holds that Jerusalem itself is not consecrated. Now we're in 54b, and the Gemara answers that the Baraisa and the Mishna and Tractate Nedarim are two Tanaim, two sages, and they are disagreeing with regard to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda concerning whether or not he holds that Jerusalem itself was sanctified. Ula said in a different opinion in the name of Bar Pada, Rabbi Meir would say, consecrated property is desacrilized if misused intentionally, and it is not desacralized if misused unwittingly. And they said that consecrated property that is misused unwittingly is desacralized only with regard to an offering, meaning the one who misused it is liable to bring a guilt offering for his action, but the property itself remains consecrated. Right? If you said, simple case, right? I'm a shepherd. Here's a nice lamb. He's a nice sheep. I'm going to bring this sheep with me to Jerusalem and offer it there when I go up for Passover. I put the lamb aside, and then I forget, or somehow the sheep gets mixed up, and I shear its wool because I need a new coat. Now, the wool that I took off that consecrated sheep, that was a misuse of property. I'm not allowed to do that. So I'm not going to be able to take the wool that I sheared off the sheep and make a coat for myself off it. But now that I did that, and because I did that, I'm going to have to bring an offering, a guilt offering for misuse of consecrated property. But the sheep itself does not become desacralized. It remains a consecrated sheep. Right, so that's what we're talking about. So let's understand what he is saying, what Ula is saying in the name of Bar Pada. He says that Rabbi Meir would say, consecrated property is desacralized, right? Loses its sanctity if it was misused intentionally, right? Especially if you ate it, because now it's gone. But it is not desacralized or deconsecrated if it was misused unwittingly. And they said that consecrated property that is misused unwittingly is desacralized only with regard to bringing an offering. The one who misused it is liable to bring a guilt offering for his action, but the property remains consecrated. So the Gemara asks, but since it is not desacralized when misused unwittingly, for what reason is he rendered liable to bring an offering, since his action had no effect? It did not render it deconsecrated, desacralized. So rather, when Ravin came from the land of Israel, from Eretz Yisrael, he explained it this way, in the name of Bar Pada. Rabbi Meir would say, consecrated property is desacralized if misused intentionally. It is not desacralized if misused unwittingly. And they said that consecrated property that is misused unwittingly is desacralized only with regard to eating. If one ate consecrated food, thereby consuming it completely, he is liable to bring an offering. If he merely misused consecrated money, the money retains its sanctity, it is not desacralized, and he is not liable to bring an offering. This presumes that you are able to void the transaction in which that money was used. If you spent the money and you can't get it back, I guess that would be like consuming it because it's gone. But if you're able to get it back, then you just unwind that transaction. The money remains sacred, and then therefore, even though you did this thing, you would not be rendered liable to bring the guilt offering for misuse of consecrated property, according to that view. Rav Nachman says that Rav Ada bar Ahava says the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir with regard to the second tithe that is considered consecrated, right? Second tithe, that's the money that you hold on until the next pilgrimage festival. You're actually holding on to the produce, right? But let's say that your produce is watermelons, right? You're a farmer who grows watermelons. Okay, so you tithe the first 2% to a priest, and you've tithed the next 10% to a Levite, and now the next 10% is second tithe, and it's yours to fund your trip to go up to Jerusalem for the pilgrimage festival. Now, ideally, you carry that produce with you, and that's what you eat while you're up there. Are you really going to carry watermelons all the way to Jerusalem? No, you can sell them, right? So you redeem the second tithe, and if you do it to yourself, if you exchange the watermelons with your own money, then I think you have to pay a 20% increase for doing it that way. But if you sell it to a third party who's going to give you a fair price, then you don't have to add 20%, or never, add 20% of the watermelons, whatever. So, and anyway, you change it into money. Now that money, you don't mix it with your other money. That Torah actually says you bind it in your hand, meaning you keep that money separate, and you can spend it when you go up on the pilgrimage festival. And that's what that money is to be used for. You get to spend it on food and drink for yourself during the pilgrimage festival, and you get to choose what you spend it on, but you have to spend it on your pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So, what are we talking about with second tithe? Where am I? Okay, so Rav Nachman says that Rav Ada bar Ahava says, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir with regard to second tithe, in that it is considered consecrated, as the Tana taught an unattributed Mishnah in accordance with his opinion. And the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda with regard to consecrated property, as the Tana taught us an unattributed Mishnah in accordance with his opinion. Now the Gemara clarifies. What is the unattributed Mishnah that is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir with regard to second tithe? It is, as we learned in Tractate Peah 7:6, it is prohibited to eat or derive benefit from fruit during the first 3 years after a tree is planted. I thought we were talking about second tithe. Why are we not talking about Orla? Orla is the prohibition in the Torah that a fruit tree, its first 3 years of growth, you can't make any use of them at all. In the 4th year, this is considered 4th year fruit. And what can you do with it? You can treat it the same way as second tithe. You've got to bring it with you up to Jerusalem, or you could sell it, presumably, and use that money for your pilgrimage. But in terms of 4th year fruit, I'm not sure if you could sell it, because what they really wanted was people to bring fruit. They wanted people to bring the fruits to Jerusalem so that during the festivals, and especially Sukkot, the city would just be, awash in fresh fruit. There would be fresh fruit everywhere. It was used to decorate the city. And so this 4th year fruit had basically the same sanctity as second tithe, right? The opinion of Rabbi Meir with regard to second tithe. This is, as we learned, it is prohibited to eat or derive benefit from fruit during the first 3 years after the tree is planted. The fruit of the 4th year is to be taken to Jerusalem and eaten there. With regard to a vineyard in its 4th year, Beis Shammai say it does not have the law of adding 1/5, i.e. if the owner himself redeems the fruit to bring money to Jerusalem to spend on food there, as one may also do with second tithe, he does not add 1/5 to its value, but redeems it for its true value. Right? If you sell it to a third party, you know you're going to get a real price, so you don't have to add money to it. You sell it. But if you're going to redeem it with your own money, you have to add 20% to it, just in case you're being a little bit overly generous in selling to yourself and how much money you're going to charge yourself for it. So that's why if you redeem second tithe yourself, you got to add the 5th, right? Add the 20%. But in terms of 4th year fruit, which also has to be taken up to Jerusalem, or it can be redeemed, but if you redeem it with your own money, you don't have to add the 5th. You don't have to add the 20%. And it also, this 4th year fruit does not have the law of disposal. What does that mean? There is no obligation to dispose of it on the eve of Passover of the 4th year of the sabbatical cycle, when all tithes that have not yet been separated must be disposed of. And Beis Hillel say it does have the law of adding 1/5 and the law of disposal. So therefore, according to Beis Hillel, 4th year fruit is treated exactly like second tithe. Now that Mishnah continues. Furthermore, Beis Shammai say it has the obligation requiring the owner of the vineyard to leave individual fallen grapes for the poor. That's called peret. And it has the commandment requiring the owner to leave incompletely formed clusters of grapes for the poor. That's called olelot. And since the vineyard is considered the owner's property, during this year he must leave these gifts for the poor. And Beis Hillel say all of it goes to the wine press to make wine. Since the grapes have sanctity, he is not obligated to leave these gifts for the poor like regular produce. The Gemara explains what is the reason for the opinion of Beis Hillel. They derive a verbal analogy from the word holy, stated with regard to a 4th year vineyard, as the verse Leviticus 19:24 states, holy for giving praise to the Lord. And from the word holy, stated with regard to second tithe, as the verse states Leviticus 27:30, holy to the Lord, this verbal analogy teaches the following. Just as second tithe has the law of adding 1/5 and it has the law of disposal, so too the 4th year vineyard has the law of adding 1/5 and it has the law of disposal. and Beis Shammai do not derive the verbal analogy of holy and holy in those two verses. And the Gemara clarifies the opinions of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai with regard to the obligation to leave peret and olalot from a fourth-year vineyard. We are definitely afield from our real topic, but having brought in this Baraisa, the Gemara explains it. And with regard to Beis Hillel, who say that the law of fourth-year produce is like the law of second tithe, in accordance with whose opinion do they hold? With regard to second tithe, if they hold in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, why does all of it go to the winepress? Didn't Rabbi Yehuda say that second tithe is itself common, i.e. non-sacred property, and the owner must therefore leave peret and olalot? Rather, is it not the case that they hold in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that second tithe is consecrated property? So the Mishnah, aligning the opinion of Beis Hillel with that of Rabbi Meir, is tantamount to there being an unattributed Mishnah in accordance with Rabbi Meir's opinion, as the law generally is in accordance with the opinion of Beis Hillel. If Beis Hillel holds like Rabbi Meir, it means that Rabbi Meir was right in this regard. So the Gemara continues with the explanation of Rav Nachman's statement. What is the unattributed Mishnah that is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda with regard to consecrated property? This is as we learned in Me'ilah. Me'ilah is the Mishnaic tractate about misuse of consecrated property. In a case where one sent an agent to buy something on his behalf and unwittingly gave him consecrated money to use, if he sent it in the possession of a halakhically competent person, like an adult as opposed to a minor, and he remembered that it was consecrated money before the agent reached the storekeeper will have misused consecrated property when he will later spend the money. And this indicates that one is liable for misuse of consecrated property even when one acts unwittingly. All right, so we're making that distinction between intentional and unwitting use of consecrated property. And what did you use it for? If you used it for betrothal or used it to purchase something, do we say that the betrothal is a betrothal or the sale is a sale? Or do we say that since it was consecrated, it wasn't yours to use it, we don't have a sale or we don't have a betrothal, and now we're making this distinction between witting and unwitting. So it seems like even unwitting use can create a betrothal. The Gemara asks, but didn't we learn an unattributed Mishnah in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda with regard to second tithe? But didn't we learn in Meiser Sheni, tractate about second tithe, with regard to one who redeems his own second tithe, he adds to it 1/5, whether the tithe was from his crop or given to him as a gift? So the Gemara clarifies, in accordance with whose opinion is this Mishnah? If we say it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, can one give second tithe to another as a gift? You have to use it yourself. But didn't he say that second tithe is property belonging to the Most High? Even though it's for your use, it belongs to God. Just like the portion of offerings that a priest might use in the temple to try and create betrothal, it's given to him to eat. But does he own it? No, it belongs to the Most High. That's why we're talking about this. So doesn't Rabbi Meir say that even though, can you give your second tithe that is for you to use? Can you give it to your friend as a gift? No, because it's not yours to give. It belongs to the Most High. The Most High allows you to use it in order to go and make your pilgrimage, but that doesn't mean you can give it away or create betrothal with it. Rather, is it not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that second tithe is common property? And consequently, this unattributed Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda with respect to second tithe, and presumably Rabbi Yehuda would allow you to use second tithe to create betrothal because it is not consecrated property that belongs to God. Rather, it's given for you for a specific purpose, but it's given to you, right? And so it's your property. Now the Gemara answers no. Actually, that Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And with what are we dealing here? It is not a situation where one gave second tithe itself as a gift, but where he gave him his entire crop in its state of being untithed produce. Consequently, the portion he gave him included tithes that had not yet been separated, and he holds that gifts that have not been separated are not considered as though they have been separated. One does not categorize the untithed produce as a mixture of regular produce and tithes, but rather as non-sacred a non-sacred thing in and of itself, right? Untithed produce is untithed produce. It is not a mix of tithed and untithed. It is untithed produce. Since the second tithe has not yet been separated, the produce has no sanctity at all, and therefore he could give it away as a gift. Now, the Gemara, he can't eat it because it's untithed, but he could maybe give away the whole crop. Now, the Gemara continues its line of inquiry. Come in here another unattributed Mishnah in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. With regard to one who redeems his own fourth-year produce, he adds to it the 1/5, whether the produce was from his crop or given to him as a gift. And the Gemara inquires, in accordance with whose opinion is this Mishnah? If we say that it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, can one give produce of the fourth year to another as a gift? But didn't we derive that one must add 1/5 from the verbal analogy of wholly of fourth-year fruit from wholly of the second tithe? And this would mean that fourth-year fruit, like second tithe, is property of the Most High and cannot be given as a gift. So rather, is it not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that these are actually common property, not yet consecrated? And the Gemara answers, actually, it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And with what are we dealing here? It is not a situation where one gave fully grown fourth-year fruit, but where he gave him the fruit when it was in a bud. It was just a bud. Had not become fourth-year, ripened fourth-year fruit yet. And this is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, who says a bud of a fruit is forbidden as orla because it is already considered a fruit. Rabbi Meir, by contrast, holds that a fruit that is not yet a fruit, that is just a bud of a fruit, this is not fruit. Therefore, the law of orla and fourth-year fruit apply only to fruit that has grown, whereas beforehand, it could be given as a gift. I'm close to done. Questions or comments? Get them in. The Gemara continues its line of inquiry. Come in here another unattributed Mishnah according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. If one was selling second tithe produce and the buyer pulled tithe worth a sela from him, thereby acquiring it, and did not manage to redeem it until its value stood at 2 sela, and he had not yet paid the seller. So the buyer gives a sela to the seller, and he thereby gains a sela, right? A sela is a coin, and the second tithe is his, since he acquired it when he pulled it, and the price was fixed at that point. The Gemara inquires, in accordance with whose opinion is this Mishnah? If we say it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, why does the buyer gain a sela? And the merciful one states in the Torah with regard to its redemption of consecrated property, quote, and he will give the money and it will be assured to him, Leviticus 27:19, from which it is derived that one acquires consecrated property only after paying money, right? You can redeem consecrated property by paying money for it. Now the money is consecrated and the thing you redeemed is not. This means that the value of the second tithe increased before he acquired it. So rather, is it not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that the second tithe is common property and it is acquired from the moment he pulled it, right? Remember, acquisition, a kinyan, even if you paid money, you haven't acquired it until you do a formal act of acquisition. What if you do the formal act of acquisition before you pay the money? Have you acquired it? Yeah. The Gemara confirms, actually, this Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Nevertheless, Rav Nachman's statement that the law with regard to second tithe is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, this is still correct. As here, there is one unattributed Mishnah that is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and while here, there are 2 unattributed Mishnayos that indicate that Beis Hillel's opinion is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The one in tractate Meiser Shenin, the other one in tractate Eduyos. And the Gemara asks, but if an unattributed Mishnah is stated that way, specifically to teach that law, what difference is there to me if it is one unattributed Mishnah or 2 unattributed Mishnahs? The Gemara suggests an alternate reasoning. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Since we learned in the Mishnah in the preferred tractate, Eduyot, in accordance with Rabbi Meir. Since the law is ruled in accordance with all of the Mishnahs in Eduyot, so elsewhere we have a principle that all the Mishnahs in Eduyot are authoritative, the fact that the opinion of Beis Hillel in that tractate is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir means that the law should be decided according to Rabbi Meir. That's where we'll leave off. Pick up tomorrow at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, with page 55. Let's take a couple of comments and questions, if any. on page 54. Reload. Come on. Bill, a small amusing anecdote of which I'm reminded by your pointing out how far afield we've gotten. As you may recall, I'm getting a second master's degree in library science, so I checked out my university library's religion section to see if they had a Talmud collection. It's the library of a big land-grant university, so the odds were good. And I found we had 3, and I didn't know which disappointed me more. That all 3 were incomplete, or that they were all shelved out of order. I'm gonna guess that Bill stood there and at least contemplated, if not actually took action, and put them in order as a public service. Joseph asks, is bringing a blemished animal considered misuse of sacred property? No. I'm pretty sure not, right? Because what have you done? Misuse of consecrated property means that you set aside an animal that could become an offering. That would be an unblemished animal. And then you used it for your own private benefit. That's me'ilah. That's misappropriation of consecrated property. Misuse of consecrated property. Bringing a blemished animal to the temple, first of all, like you fooled yourself. You thought, oh, either you didn't know, right? You brought an animal, you didn't know it was blemished. Or you said, that's not a big blemish. They won't care. It'll be fine. And then when you get to the temple, the priest says to you, that's a blemished animal. We can't bring it. Now, you have an animal that you consecrated, which cannot be brought on the altar. Now, there are rules for what you need to do with that animal. In some cases, you let it graze, and perhaps the blemish will go away, and then you can bring it as an offering. Or you have to just let it graze until the end of its days, or in certain cases, there's other outcomes. But since you designated an animal to bring as an offering, and then because of its blemish, you can't bring it, you're going to have to replace that animal. I think even if it was blemished, but then you used it, it was a cow and you used it to pull your cart, I think even there's a very interesting question. If it's a blemished animal that can't be brought, but it was designated to be brought as an offering, and you used it for your own purposes, it's not the fact that it's blemished that's misused, but did you misuse a blemished animal? Is that me'ilah? That's a great question, and I'm not sure what the answer is. If that's what you're asking, I don't know the answer. Good question. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night. And regarding Israel, please God, let good triumph over evil. Let all the captives be freed. Let all the wounded be healed. And may we hear only good news.